domestic violence crosses all racial lines. We take a closer look at the local resources that are available to help and how curbing the root of this social problem should be expanded beyond just a traditional response. It's so here on this week's Latino Motion. Join us.
Choose quality, value, distinction. Choose Stockton.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, and Stockton University. This edition of Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is brought to you by the HD Studios at the campus of Stockton University. Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, healthcare you can believe in. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas. Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias, and thank you for joining us today. The effects of domestic violence on individuals and families and the community are far-reaching and devastating. Victims living in violent homes experience isolation, low self-esteem, and a sense of hopelessness, which is why it's critical to have a welcoming, safe environment for victims to escape from these situations. Joining me is Tamu King-Lewis. She is with the Women's Center. Tamu, welcome to Latino Motion.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let me just make sure I get the title right. You're the Director of Social Justice Programs. So
yes.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, I cover most of the programs, our Violence Intervention Program, our PALS program, our Home to Work program, our Father's Care program. So I'm over the Victim Services program and the Batterer Services.
Okay, so you just pointed to an issue that the Women's Center is not just a shelter.
Yes.
You have a whole array of programs
services.
and
Yes.
services.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me a little bit about a lot of folks who are facing that situation, that want to leave a domestic violence situation and looking to escape. It's not very easy for them just to leave and go to a shelter.
No, it's not.
So tell me a little bit about what's involved in that process and how you help transition someone so that they could find a safe haven at a shelter.
That process is a hard part. You know, it's hard for them to make that phone call. So a lot of times we have a client that will make the call, and sometimes they will immediately feel okay coming into the shelter, and we'll help them through that process. And then other times, for reasons whether financial or whether they're children or whether they're just fearful to leave, we'll just help them, whether through the hotline, help to build them up, safety plan with them. And sometimes they're coming for counseling, just to kind of safety plan in person until they can get up the confidence and the nerve to say, okay, I can leave now. So sometimes it might take a couple months. It might take a year for them to build up that confidence to help them to move forward. And that's the process that we help them with. Now,
the shelter itself, you take the victim. Do you also take the children as well? So there it is, a safe haven for both the victim as well as the children.
Definitely.
And essentially, I know I've heard of that there's a lot of shelters that have a big waiting list. So if someone calls, they're looking for it. Is that the case in your shelter?
It's not so much a waiting list. There are times when people call that we are full. Okay. So we will reach out to other shelters in the state to get them into a shelter. So we'll advocate for them. So we don't necessarily put them on a waiting list. That we'll advocate to other shelters until we can find a place for them to go.
Obviously, someone escaping from a domestic situation, they're looking to get away from the perpetrator, and sometimes that's not a day or two. It's a significant amount of time that they need to stay away. How do you help the victim transition? I mean, I understand this is just a temporary situation, but how do you help them so that they could find a permanent location? Everybody's needs are different. So we might have someone that comes into the shelter and they are employed,
So we help them to plan out what's their steps, if they have a savings. We do have transitional housing. It's not large where some clients can transition into there and live for 18 months, but we only have a few apartments for that to happen. But that's one of our options. There are some clients that they just need to get away for a few days and they might have family. So we help them to connect with their family, maybe in another state. Or there are some where they literally have to be there maybe 60, maybe sometimes 90 days to kind of plan out a plan to whether get an apartment or to get a job. So each case is different. So we work with them on an individual basis to kind of help them meet their needs.
And you mentioned a safety plan, because that's always top of mind, particularly when someone's being abused and they urgently need to get away from their abuser, to have a safety plan, whether they're at the shelter or out on their own. What's involved in the safety preparation that you do?
In that plan, if they come, whether it's over the phone or let's say they're coming for counseling, we tell them about some of the important things to keep, to maybe put somewhere else, put with family members, maybe having an extra key, maybe packing a smaller bag where he won't notice it. So we kind of talk with them about some things so when they do have to leave quickly, they'll have some of the things that they need as far as the important paperwork, whether money saved, whether some clothes for them and the children, so that we talk about those types of things so they don't have nothing if they had to leave quickly.
So most people get to you through the intervention hotline. There's a 24-hour hotline that you provide. And so you get a variety of people who call in, whether they're in an immediate crisis, they need to get out right away, and you're able to help them even if they're not from the Atlantic County region, because obviously your shelter's located in Atlantic County, but you cover much more than just Atlantic County.
Yes, we have people in our shelter from other counties. If they're in need, let's say another county doesn't have shelter, just like if we're full and we're calling another county for shelter, the same thing happens, vice versa. So everyone that's in our county is not necessarily from Atlantic County.
Let's talk a little bit about the services beyond the shelter, which is just being able to get away temporarily while someone is seeking a restraining order, trying to get away from the person who's doing the harm. How do you help them in terms of either securing a restraining order or through the legal process?
We have what's called a legal advocate, and she can help guide people many times the process of getting a restraining order. Or even a crisis counselor can help the victim through the process of getting a restraining order, whether they're in our shelter or if they come for counseling, we can help them through those steps. We don't force them to do that. We just, tell them the positives about getting it. Some clients get them. Some clients believe that there's no need because sometimes they feel like they might get hurt even more if they got it. So we just kind of give them the benefits and help them through the process. And many times we will go to court with them just for support. No other reason. We don't talk to the judge. We're just there for the support for the client to help them feel comfortable as they go through that process.
And when someone is at the shelter, they're also getting services, obviously, the counseling and other supportive services as well.
Yes, we have individual counseling, group counseling. They can also take part of our home to work program as well.
Actually, we're going to get into some of the programs, but you have a whole array of programs that we want to discuss in more detail. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. I have the pleasure of continuing my discussion with Tamil King Lewis. She is with the Women's Center, and we're discussing an array of services that they do provide. And one of the services we already discussed was the Violent Intervention Program, which is your 24 our crisis line, very critical for anyone who is going through a crisis.
Yes.
And even if that's the number to call if you're just looking for services, help, like you suggested, maybe a safety plan and other services. Is that correct? That's
Yes.
the number to call?
Yes.
All right, so tell me a little bit about some of the other programs. You started to mention about the Home to Work program for displaced workers. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, it's for displaced homemakers, and it helps them to find employment.
Okay.
Maybe some women who haven't worked in a long time, help them to find employment, teaches them computer skills, because things are, we're in the age of computers, and
Right.
for a lot of women, if they haven't worked in many years, it teaches them like Excel, Office, and we also have a Dress for Success closet, to where a lot of times a lot of women don't have the professional clothing, so we would give them a couple outfits to help them go on interviews and to start their job.
It's part of the problem of why some people don't come out early in terms of when they are going through domestic violence, because they're financially tied to
Yep.
their partner and perhaps have not been out in the workplace for quite some time. So this is very helpful.
Yes, it is.
To get the skills they need so that they could be more independent and obviously help them to move forward. Tell me a little bit about the PAL program. It's PAL's program.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
That's okay. Peace of Learn Solution. And that's our program. It's a domestic violence program for children.
Okay.
From ages 3 to 17. And those are children who are victims or survivors of been in homes of domestic violence. So in order to be a part of that program, the non-offending parent, and I say that because that could either be mom or dad,
Okay.
the non-offending parent can no longer have the batterer in the household,
Okay.
because it's a therapeutic program. So it's a 6-month program that helps the children to heal through different modalities like art, play therapy, dance, drama, because many times we know children won't sit across and just
Right.
talk.
So this is a great, so if you've been in a domestic violence situation and you manage to leave the situation, but you still have to deal with the trauma that your children have gone through.
Yes.
This is a program that you don't need to be part of the shelter, you don't need to be receiving other services, but certainly you could be taking care of the children and make sure that they're getting the therapy and the help they need.
Yes. And we do also through that program, it's a holistic program, so we don't mandate, but we do, suggest and ask the non-offending parent to also get therapy as a part of that program, because they both need to heal
Right.
in order to be whole.
Well, let's talk about that piece of it, and that you do have a piece where you do help the offender, the batterer. You have the Father's Care Network program. Tell me a little bit about what's entailed in that program.
A part of that is what we call the FEA, which is the Fathers Ending Abuse Program, and it's our batterers intervention program where they get counseling. Well, it's a group counseling session where they learn skills, they become accountable for their action, and they learn different skills to deal with their anger so that they don't keep responding in the same way that they were taught.
And essentially, these are the batterers, and what if I know men go through abuse as well, but the vast majority of the abuse are victims are women. So do you also counsel and provide supportive services for men who have been victims of
Yes, we do.
abuse?
Yes, we do. For domestic violence and for sexual abuse.
Wow.
We see men as well.
A big problem that we've seen, it's always been a big problem, but there's been a lot more of a focus, has been human trafficking. Tell me a little bit about how your agency's involved in human trafficking, at least the awareness and providing counseling.
Our human trafficking program is statewide, so it's not just Atlantic County. We cover the whole state of New Jersey, to where we help victims to find shelter, to get counseling as well. So that's our main focus in regards to the human trafficking, because it is so large amongst the state of New Jersey, which people really don't know. We always think of a third world country, but human trafficking is so huge within New Jersey. So we help in that process of trying to get them out of that situation, help them find another place to live, shelter them, and like I said, also get them counseling so that they can begin to get whole.
Most of those individuals have been victims of abuse, and certainly have been forced to work either as prostitutes
Forced
or
prostitution. Yeah.
and we know that there have been some arrests as close as Atlanta City.
Yep.
So it's not just a big city problem. It's it's pretty broad.
Well, Atlantic City is one of one of the largest hubs in
Really?
regards to human trafficking. It's a main port. It's a main transportation port for human trafficking.
And that's a big impact certainly on Latinos. Sometimes they do take advantage of individuals who are undocumented. They're
Yep.
fearful of coming forward because of getting in trouble, getting deported, and so forth. But they could get help,
Oh, yes.
and that would be through the same number.
Yes.
And there's also a statewide human trafficking number as well that we'll put up on the screen.
Yes.
Now, recently you also are doing some more outreach to the Latino community,
Yes.
and I know you hired a bilingual and outreach specialist. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, she's our director of bilingual and outreach services, and it's so important because we have that. She's going to bridge that gap, between the Women's Center and the Hispanic community so we can provide better services, because a lot of times when people think of the Women's Center, they're not sure whether or not we can assist them, whether or not we have someone there that can, speak Spanish or be able to translate. And we do, we're getting much better at those services so that we can help all people of color, so that's why we are so focused on this social justice initiative so that we can help all people the best way that we can.
And when someone calls the hotline, are you able to provide someone that speaks Spanish as well?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yes.
so
And if we don't have, at that moment, let's say if someone's not there on that shift, we do use language line.
Okay.
So we just don't turn people away.
It's great to know. Well, this is very useful information. Thank you. We're going to continue this discussion with my next guest, but thank you for joining us on
Thank
the
you.
show. We're sure we'll have you back in the future. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. If you'd like to support the Women's Center, we ask you to come out and join us for the second annual Race Against Hate. It is taking place on September the 19th. It is a walk and run, and it's taking place over in Linwood, New Jersey, Saturday the 9th at 8 a.m. Hope you could join us there.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. Curbing the root of domestic violence should be more than just a traditional response. Joining me to discuss this is Dr. Jessie Ortiz. Jessie, welcome to Latino Motion.
It is an honor for me to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, when we talk about the traditional response on domestic violence, typically we were talking about a victim's advocate, if you will. Obviously, we still have that role. We still need to have that role. But you are a intimate partner counselor, if you will, or certified to be a counselor as an intimate partner. What's the switch? What's the switch that's taking place?
So once again, it's a real honor to be here. And as we were talking before, you were discussing how in the shelter, this great team is empowering, not anymore maybe victims. They're in the process of becoming survivors. Mm-hmm. Because once they start to receive empowerment in different skills, in different aspects of their self-esteem, to participate in one-on-one counseling, but also in group with other people and relate and raise their awareness, is when you start identifying that this is not only a matter of women or men, is something that impacts the whole society. And when we talk about intimate partner, is because remember the term domestic, and we only thinking about a household, about home, family, tradition, but domestic violence, it also can appear as partner between different relationships. Teenagers, let's say friends that they're dating. What about people or couples, same-sex partners? So this matter goes beyond the boundaries.
And I know we're here at a college, the Stockton University, where we're recording this show. And interesting enough, a lot of the colleges are aware of the issue that there is relationship abuses that take place even among college students, high school students.
Exactly.
Just one quick statistics, 65% of survivors are assaulted before the age of 18. So that is very significant.
Very important that we are, as I said before, aware of these numbers, of these statistics, because it's an issue of control and power, the misuse of control and power, and it's a repetitive pattern that sometimes is good, as Ms. Tamu was saying before, that these kids can start receiving therapy at young age, and whenever they start building new relationships, they can understand the pattern of a healthier relationship in relation maybe to something that they saw when they were growing up as kids.
Well, this should raise an alarm for us as parents. Obviously, when we're talking about 65% of the survivors are the age under 18 years old, as parents, that should really concern us. We need to educate our children.
And we need to communicate, because most of the time kids, and I'm not saying kids, our teenagers are dating. They go out, they text, they Facebook, they use a lot of social media. And this type of violence is not only maybe as we knew it in the past, violence that is reflected in verbally or physical, maybe some type of financial, but what about cyberbullying? What about violence that is reflected in with technology? And that's very common these days with our youth.
One of the things that impacts primarily the Latino community, the fact that there's a lot of abuse that's unreported. One of the statistics indicate that 15% of sexual assaults are reported to the police, only 15%.
Only 15%.
So that's a staggering. What message should we get out to our Latino community about the importance of reporting any assault that takes place?
The important fact that, and I really appreciate that we're here, this great team that we met before in the shelter hotlines, there's help out there. And that's the importance. We don't have to be ashamed. We have to understand that numbers are there. It means that this is not an isolated, my case might be not an isolated case. And there's more help available. There's help in your language. People that they're passionate, they care, and they understand the differences that might be affecting you. Immigration, maybe your social status. Maybe they understand that you can be a very educated professional, but you can face difficulties as well.
Well, one of the things that, I know you're a mental health advocate. You provide many mental health counseling services in your practice. 50% of women receiving inpatient mental health services are sexually assaulted. So that's a vulnerable population that we also need to be concerned about.
And that's part of, it's just part of what abuse can translate. Is sexual abuse is also part of it. But sometimes this is alarming when we see sexually abused, we see not saying this in a proper way, or physical abuse is more evident. But what if it's just something that I'm not really sure? What's going on? He's saying something about me talking in an improper way. Is this abuse? Or maybe that game, playing, making me feel that I'm crazy. My self-esteem is a very complex issue that is important that we can go and get and look for help.
Well, Jesse, thank you for sharing this information. There's a lot that needs to take place and a lot of outreach that needs to happen to our community. Thanks for joining us, and thank you once again for joining us here on Latino Motion.
Choose quality, value, distinction. Choose Stockton.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, healthcare you can believe in. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.